greater depth is important. That's the purpose of the RCE. How can we build that? Because it's no good for a political leader to realize, okay, that really is the problem. But if I start moving in that direction, that's the end of me politically. We need that. If I were to go back to what I said, that you wouldn't show up with a specialist, let's just assume that this room is the world. And if I were to start appointing people, 3 of you would be from the United States, 7 of you would be from all of Europe. That's Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Northern, and the Mediterranean. 9 of you would be from Africa, and 9 more would be from South America. 35 of you would be from Asia. So that this whole side of the room is Asia. Now that's one way of looking at it, but I could also point out 5 of you and just go around and pick you, because this is how it happens in the world. It's where you're born. Largely it's about the luck of the draw. And while I said no PhDs would be in the room, in fact, there may be just on the edge of 1 person who had graduated from higher education with a master's or PhD, etc. But 5 of you would be disabled. This whole side of the room, 26 of you, would have no sanitation at all. In fact, 10 of you, the front half of this group, you wouldn't even have water. 8 of you would be starving, another 8 couldn't read, etc. So we can go through 4 of you as refugees. 3 of you, though, would own a car, and 1 of you would be connected to the internet. It's a different way of trying to understand it. But from an economics point of view, if I were to do that, the world's wealth is about 120 trillion. It's a T. I know Europeans have more zeros and all the rest of it, but right. But it's roughly 120 trillion. But the important thing is, in this room, I would go and pick out 1 person representing 100 million people. 1 of you would get 48 trillion out of the 120. And then if I added another person, so there were the 2 of you standing there, you'd have half the world's wealth. You'd have 60 trillion. If I added 4 more and 6 of you were there, that would be up to 112 trillion. If I added more, so that there were 24 of you, you would have 18.5 of the 120 trillion. And the remainder of you would have 1.5 trillion. This side of the room would have 1.5, and you would have 118.5. So the feeling, but this group, you see, you'd be splitting 1.5, but I'm sorry, you wouldn't split it evenly. Half of you would get the 1.5, and the other half would get nothing. You're the ones who are living on under $1, roughly at $2 a day or less. That figure sort of bounces around. But you know, the wealthy people here, they're really nice. They've got that 118 trillion, they got it invested at, what could we make now, 3%? Maybe even more. And so for the other half, we'll give you 0.3% in development aid. Well, we did, but now, because of the economic crisis, I'm sorry, we can't afford it. So it's just, how can the general public grasp the way things are and not be overwhelmed by by simplistic slogans. Oh, well, that's the way things are, etc. So in closing, what I want to say is that there is a tremendous opportunity that is out there. The world is genuinely shaken at this point. As I travel around, I spend most of my life traveling. There's talk of, should the American dollar even be the currency of the IMF and the World Bank? In fact, the whole IMF is so shaken that they're holding emergency meetings right now talking about governance and how they can present things to the world, because many governments are trying to say, well, if we didn't create the economic crisis, it created somewhere else, you know, it came upon us, etc. But of course, the general public, when they hear that, they say, well, then why are we going faster into globalization if we have no control over what we're doing? And so trying to get clarity and so on for the message. I think the thing that has shaken the world so much is that it's one of the groups that they respect so much. And the banks that themselves have created, they've been a sort of a central part of all this. But when you really stop and think about it, it's the public, too, who over-purchased, who were over-leveraged, who have created a lot of this. But what politician can blame the general public? A politician can do it safely, at any rate. So, and the general public is aware that we've got these other crises that seem to be looming. The first one being climate change, built on top of the economic failure. But the minute they start seeing climate change as the problem, they understand that right behind that is biodiversity. Where as climate starts, so many of the world's flora and fauna are living at the edge of their sort of critical life support systems. And we don't understand it. As a Canadian, I can tell you, we didn't understand the collapse of the cod. We thought we could ease back in the fishing and the cod would come back. We pushed it and then eased back and nothing happened. The cod continued to disappear, and probably there will never be another cod fisheries in the richest part of that the oceans have ever seen for cod. There's less of a belief, I think, now that there can be a technological fix. Because we've learned that just about every time we try to fix things through a technological leap, there's a feedback loop that comes back and bites us. And then we have to come up with another technological loop. And then that feedback loop comes back. We learn, but we pay one hell of a price every time we learn. It isn't a simple thing. So now what is emerging is, we're going back, it's a question of values. It's a question of ethics and people talking and saying what really is important to me. And I think that's the healthy kind of discussion that we really need. And again, it's the RCEs that are set in a situation where they can bring different sectors together to share these kinds of things and to explore it. So the idea of the RCEs, I think, are proving to be very useful, and I'd like to close by asking one request, sort of you. I would like to ask of Bene to continue to take leadership in exploring the whole concept of the economics. How do we increase that so that, how can we embed it so it's not just a standalone, a bigger standalone, but how can we embed it? One of the things I'm doing in Canada is I realize that the very young children in schools